Hello, America. This is Mr. Citizen Patriot. I finally have made it here to Washington, D.C. I've been around for 17 years, born in Los Angeles in 2003. My role is to bring patriotism to a higher level in our country. My role is to wear this uniform for the sake of the men and women who wore their uniforms to be shot at, that I may be free. I didn't go to be shot at, but the least that I can do for those men and women who gave their lives for me is to wear this uniform to remind the world who they are and what they've done. And I've come also to raise the spirit of patriotism in our country, to come together, whether you're on the political right or left, it doesn't matter right now. We as a nation must come together, and what better person to help bring the nation together than a person like Mr. Citizen Patriot. And for more information on Mr. Patriot and how to get in touch with me and participate in this new awakening of American patriotism, go to mrpatriot.us. Get involved with this new American patriotism that we're bringing to you today.
Hey, everyone. This is Ken White. I'm sure you're wondering where Ted is. Welcome to Your Power Weapon on Urban Smart Network. Ted is actually our guest tonight. We have some very important issues to discuss, and the only person that would be more qualified to speak of them would be Mr. Ted Hayes. So I'm honored to interview him tonight. Tonight on the show, we'll also have an accompaniment, Keith Hardeen. Keith Hardeen?
Yeah. Hey, everybody. I'm glad to be welcome to the show, and I'm glad to be here. So we got a good man here that is able to articulate what Ted is going to talk to us about. So let's hear it.
Outstanding. Also with us tonight is an angel mom, one of President Trump's recognized angel moms, Agnes Gibney. Agnes?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I am really excited to be on the same show with Mr. Ted Hayes. So thank you for the opportunity.
Outstanding. And yours truly, Mr. Ted Hayes himself. Ted?
Hey, Keith, Ken, Keith, Agnes, everybody. I'm glad to be here again another night. And Your Power Weapon. And Keith, Ken, I want to thank you, sir, for hosting for me tonight, because normally I do the hosting, but because of what's been going on around homelessness this last week in New York and here in LA, around 3 women being killed, 2 here in LA and 1 in New York, that has hit national news, and I'm very concerned how it's being addressed right now. So I'm glad to have the opportunity where I'm asked questions specifically and can answer them without trying to keep everybody together. So you got to do that.
Exactly. You know, it's often said in life that nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. Ted Hayes has been caring about America, about the chattel slaves, about the trajectory of America his entire life. You know, born in Columbus, Georgia, on March 9th, 1951, a unique human being came to the earth on that day. And when you ask about how much a person cares, my backdrop would show that. Ted, can you expand on what we're seeing in my backdrop? Who is that gentleman and what are you doing?
That is my AKA alter ego, Mr. Patriot, visiting a World War II veteran. That's a guy's name there is Aldo. And if you just slide to the side a little bit, King Unicorn, and they can see Aldo. This is about 3 or 4 days before Aldo passed away into heaven. And we have been working with him for quite a while. He used to come out to our demonstrations. This is part of what Mr. Patriot does. We go to veterans hospitals and look out for our veterans. So, yeah, thank you for showing that.
Of course, because nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And Ted Hayes cares an awful lot about us. So we're fortunate to have him in this timeline. You know, they say people are born for such a time as this. You're going to see a lot of parallels tonight as we do this interview with Ted Hayes with some of the national issues that are going on in the world today. You know, they say there's nothing new under the sun. But when it comes to the issue of homelessness, the lack of respect for the chattel slaves, the parallel between some of the people who have migrated legally and illegally into our country Tonight, as we discuss these issues with Ted Hayes, you're going to learn more about why it's so important that the homelessness issue in America is addressed with respect, integrity, and honor. So, without any further ado, let us begin. Ted, I want to ask you a series of questions. And when I do, obviously, and this is the kind of uniqueness of this matter, since I'm interviewing you on your show,
That's good.
the
I'm
mic,
glad. Thank you.
the mic will be yours. But again, I want to ask this question first to get it started so people understand what's going on here. How long have you been the nation's foremost homeless revolution activist? Why and how did you get involved in this very important issue?
Thank you for asking that question, because a lot of people don't really know. Back in 37 years ago, I became homeless on purpose to go live on Skid Row in downtown LA, the heart, the what I call the black hole vortex of homelessness, and LA being the national capital of homelessness. This black hole vortex is the very heart of the national capital called Skid Row. And I lived there on purpose for 8 years, sleeping on the sidewalks and acclimating to that lifestyle, to where even the cold didn't bother me anymore, because you just acclimate. And I discovered a lot, and I did it because of what Yeshua, Jesus Christ, said in the scriptures. He said, if anyone forsakes father, mother, houses, land, husband, wife, children for my sake, my kingdom's sake, um, they will receive 100-fold in this world, in the next world to come. And so, based on that, of course, it took a lot of persuasion of myself to do it. Based on that, I went, and I went to learn what this was: taste it, feel it, smell it, be harassed by the police, all of it, having to, bodily relieve myself, in the streets, which is very humiliating. It changes your whole psyche. You become culturalized.
So,
Homelessness becomes
with all due respect, Ted, what you're saying is you didn't have a hotel room where, when things got really rough, you could duck in and just go, get yourself some caviar and all of that. You actually did this for 8 years.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. All kinds of weather and circumstances, and laying on a sidewalk night after night. At the first time when I laid down the sidewalk was very frightening. Well, the whole time was frightening. Every day I wrote my life off, because I knew I could die at any moment. So I did not see in the evening. I just saw it moment by moment. And, rats would crawl over our bodies at night and stuff. After a while, you get used to it. And ironically, it becomes an ethos or culture, and you actually find freedom and tranquility with what most people think is misery.
Yeah, I wanted to expand on something real quick about the homeless time that you spent on purpose. You
Yes,
go
sir.
to college, and in the first 4 years, you end up with a BA or a BS degree. Then you go for an additional 2 years, and you end up with a master's degree.
Yeah.
Then you go for an additional 2 years, and you end up with a doctorate's degree.
Yeah.
You, sir, spent 8 years in an environment that should have given you a doctoral degree in homelessness. So I guess when we go forward, your thesis would be the ethos of homeless culture. What's meant by that? What does the ethos of homeless culture mean?
It means that when people were first kicked out of the mainstream society, the rat race of the mainstream society, at first they're angry, they're embarrassed, they're depressed, they're confused. They go through all the social service programs to get back up on their feet, and they may make it, and then they graduate. But once they graduate, there's no place for them to go into the mainstream and remain there, so they fall back in. I have seen people over the years go 3 or 4 times through a system and fall back in, and after a while, human nature says, I'm going to acclimate to my environment. I am going to embrace my pain so that I will stay sane. I may look insane to you. I may look mentally ill to you, but my values of survival have changed for my liberation and for my freedom. And there's nothing, now that I am free, that you could do for me, to make me go back into the same rat race treadmill environment that drove my black ass out here in the first place. You see,
So
for me, to go back into that would be insanity for sure.
what
Now,
you're saying is,
most people cannot articulate that because they fell in and they're constantly struggling. I went in eyes wide open looking for this so that one day, like today, I would be able to speak on behalf of that unspoken for population from my heart and not from my head.
and I get you on that, Ted. And what I'm getting from that, and what I'm trying to translate to the audience is, so what you're saying is they simply found that level where life is peaceful, whereas you said they're not in the rat race. When I was a police officer, I learned that there are some people who intentionally commit crimes just so they can return back to the big house because the big house was all they knew. Is that what you're saying this is similar to?
Yes, same thing. That's why the homeless industrial complex and the prison industrial complex are actually linked together and are twins of one another, conjoined twins of each other. And I remember one time at Dome Village, very nice place, and we'll talk about later. But when I was in my office there, because I lived there too for 13 years with homeless people. And they brought to me one day this young Mexican dude, and they said, Ted, you got to come help Jose. I use the name Jose. He's crying. He's really upset. I said, oh, really? Okay, I can be right up. So I went over to his dome. We were sitting outside, and I put my arms around him and said, hey, Jose, what's up, homie, man? What do you need, brother? He said, I want to go home. And I said, okay, brother, where you want to go? Pico, Rivera, you want to go to Baldwin Hills, East LA? Where you want to go, homie? He said, Folsom prison,
Folsom
ladies and gentlemen.
State Prison. Yeah.
The next day, that young man went out and threw a brick through a window, and he went back to prison.
Was he on his third strike? Was he a three striker?
No,
What was going on?
he was. What happens is, same with the homeless. You could take a homeless person, give them all the programming, put them in a very nice apartment somewhere, and that person or family will find themselves back in the streets again because they're lonely. They can't make it in society. But with their group out there in the encampment, they had security, they had family, they had an understanding. They felt like
sense of belonging is what you're saying. They have a sense of belonging. Well, Ted, so far, I want to thank you for everything you've delivered to the people. This is some interesting information that anyone who has not looked at the homeless issue, now you're beginning to get a glimpse of what's going on out there. I'd like to bring Keith in on this part of the show. Keith, so far, we've heard Ted explained why he got involved. He became homeless on purpose. He stayed in the streets for 8 years so he could learn how the homeless situation exists. What are your thoughts on that, Keith?
Well, it's interesting because I'll bring into the conversation how God trains us. He chastises us. He trains us. Not that he brings evil onto us, but he allows certain aspects of evil to come to confront us, or we confront evil with the hopes that we will depend on him to overcome it. And I think of the Israelites when they were first, after they had left Egypt, the bondage of Egypt and slavery. Well, God, and I'm paraphrasing, but God was saying in Judges that, well, these people are not yet trained how to do war. They're not trained how to do war. So I'm going to allow certain groups, factions, to come against them just to train them how to do war and trust in me. So a lot of times things happen in our life. I think that's a part of the way it goes in the believer's life, is that some things will come up so that it trains us to be dependent on God. Right now, the world and even in America, they see people are more dependent on government than they are God. So government actually thinks that we belong to government instead of belonging to God. So that's why he delivers us out of bondage, is so that we can serve him. And okay, I associate that situation with Ted.
And you know what? I have to agree with you, Keith. When I was listening to Ted Hayes explain how he became homeless on purpose, I was reminded of the Exodus story of Moses, where he ended up having to work in the mud pits with his people just so he could understand what was going on with them. I did see that parallel too. And again, with us tonight, we have Agnes Gibney. Agnes Gibney will be recognized by most of you as an angel mom from President Trump's program of angel moms. She's also a naturalized citizen. She came to America the right way, by way of Hungary, when the Russians invaded Hungary. Agnes, you've heard what Ted Hayes had to say about this homeless issue. How does this strike you? What do you get from this?
Well, very enlightening to listen to Ted speak. I married my husband in 1983. In about 1985, I started listening to Ted Hayes and seeing all the injustice and all the brutality from the police against the homeless people. And unfortunately, homeless people are viewed with disgust, not compassion. They are viewed with judgment, not understanding, and they are viewed with racism. That's why 60% of them are homeless, of the Black community. The racism and not equals. We're all equal, and one race or another should not be treated with disrespect because of the color of their skin. And I find it very offensive in a country like United States of America that we do not have a program to help those that had fallen into hard times or for whatever reason. I mean, Ted was a choice, and I highly respect that because he wanted to truly understand what it's like to be homeless. But some people just fell in because they fell ill, lost their jobs, they lost their homes, and they just needed a little help. Not a handout.
Well, Agnes, I just want to point this out. While we were listening to Ted Hayes explain this homeless, dynamic to us, he did say that there are programs out there and people are enrolled in those programs, and yet, ironically, they find themselves back in this system. Now, full disclosure, I know you personally, and I appreciate you as a friend, and I know you to be a person who does not see color. You deal with people on the content of their character, which is one of the things I find so endearing about you, Agnes Gibney. I want to bring Ted back on because you tapped on something, Agnes, and I want him to expand on that to find out if what you said, let's do some fact checking of our own, ladies and gentlemen. Agnes did say that over 60% of the homeless community is African American. That sounds very shocking to me. So, Ted, I need to bring you back on to answer the statement that Agnes made. Could you fact check that for me, brother?
Yes, she's right. Nationwide, the Black citizens, chattel slave descendants, are only 11, maybe 12% of the general population of the United States. Yet we are over 60% of the population of homelessness. Here in LA, the national capital of homelessness, folks, Black citizens, Angelenos, are about 8-9% city, county, respectively. Yet in each of them, we range over 40% of the homeless population. Now, on Skid Row, the heart of it, 90% of all the homeless there, whether they live in the hotels, motels, programs, shelters, down to the sidewalk and automobiles, 90% are Black males, followed by Black females with their children, and then a multi-ethnic mix of the rest. Now, you could say, Black people really screwed up. On one hand, yes, that's true, but there's a reason for that. And that's the purpose of this conversation tonight. What is the reason for that? It's like every year, folks, 7,500 young Black men die by the hands of gunfire, by the hands of young Black men. Right here in Inglewood, just 2 nights ago, 4 young Black men were gunned down by other Black men.
So Ted, I want to interject.
Why is that? The question. Why is that?
Right. But I want to interject right there. Just please forgive me, bear with me, doing my thing. What you're saying and what Agnes has said should and is shocking to some, that you have 60% of the homeless community is African American. Of that 60%, nationwide, of that 60%, 90% of the homeless population are Black men, followed by Black women. And then you were going to on Skid Row, and you were going to go on to say about the incredible epidemic, the pandemic of violence, of violence. But I want to interject this into the people right now. Do you see why it's important that when we're talking here on Urban Smart Network on the show, Your Power Weapon, you young people need to tune into this show. You need to listen and understand the underpinning of reality, because they want you looking at Snoop Dogg. They want you looking at these basketball players and football players and the different various shows that glamorize drugs and that type of atmosphere. Meanwhile, in the really real, we're dying. Aren't we dying, Ted?
Yes, and that's because, folks, that's because for 403 years, remember, black citizens, American Africans did not come here with a willingness to participate in the American dream. They were brought here against, our ancestors were brought here against their will, shackled in chains, and we never got that straight. Halfway through, around 1860s, y'all, 1861 through 65, the immigrant people, the white immigrant people, the people came here from England and Europe, those early days, those immigrant people had a civil war over us, the existence of the black slave, the commodity of the chattel slaves. They had a war over this matter. And 740,000 of those young white innocent boys who had to do with slavery, they died around this issue. And after that war, folks, we were given some power by these immigrant white people to bring ourselves up and catch up with them as equal citizens, experiencing equal citizenship in this country through the Civil Rights Act of 1866, that document right there. That is the most powerful document right now, comparatively in America, because in that document hangs the fate of the Union Republic of the United States of America. That document became the 14th Amendment. And most people don't realize that is the national birth certificate. It is the power weapon and tool of the chattel slaves to wield, but has been kept a secret from us for 155 years. And now, as Ken expressed earlier, God has sent me to this country at this time, to this town with this situation and this particular, what we call a black OG body, so I can explain these things in a civil and peaceful way to you so you can empower yourself as well.
Exactly. And Ted, I believe in that. I mean, I'm honored that I've come to know you. I've been watching. I looked for myself. As I said before, nobody cares, what you know until they know how much you care. I see you, and you have been doing this pretty much a lifetime. You
Well,
believe in this.
37 years I've been doing this portion of my activist life. I thought up until 2005 I was a civil rights activist because I was fighting for black issues and poor people. That doesn't make you a civil rights activist. You're a civil rights activist when you understand the Civil Rights Act of 1866 and the 14th Amendment and know how to wield that executive power that we've been granted.
And see,
so yeah, and when you say putting a value on caring, that's why I did it, because people, the funny thing about it, when word got around in the homeless community downtown that I came down there willingly, they became endeared to me. They listened
because they know how much you care. They saw how much you care. And so, Ted, I wanna try to amalgamize everything that we're talking about here tonight. We're talking about homelessness. You briefly touched on the violence that's happening in the homeless community. And given that there have been 3 very poignant acts of violence across the nation that were perpetrated by homeless people, there's a question that's begged to be asked, and perhaps you can shed some light on it. Why won't the civil rights leaders and the entities, why is it the blackness of the perpetrators of the murders is not discussed? That was the question I meant to ask you.
It's a good question, Ken. And I firmly believe that it's the same reason they won't discuss why 7,500 young black men kill each other, why 40% of all the abortion rate in America are black women, when we're only 11% of the population, when we lead in every negative social statistic in the country, except for one, which is teenage suicide. That is led by Hispanic Latino teenagers. The African-American leaders, the civil rights leaders, the Congressional Black Caucus, they don't know. They don't know what to do about it. I really firmly believe.
Can I interject this? Can I interject this statement?
If they did know, I firmly believe they did know, they would do.
Well, I don't. With all due respect, Ted, they do know. And I don't mean to be contrary to what you're saying.
Yeah, you are.
Maxine Waters. Yeah, okay, you got me. I'm busted. Maxine Waters has been a congresswoman for what, 30 years?
I've known Maxine Waters for 37 years. She's my buddy, man. Now be careful, because you're my buddy now.
I'm coming at her, brother. I'm coming at her, because my next question was going to be about civil rights leaders and the political entities. Come on, Ted. She's been in Los Angeles for 37 years and has amassed an incredible amount of wealth and power and influence. I don't see much change.
Let me give you a little personal experience with Maxine Waters. That's my girlfriend.
Talk to me.
Why
don't I believe you? Why don't I believe you, Ted?
Maxine Waters and I, we've been at each other. We fight publicly, then we make up, then we fight, then we make up, then we fight. And I'll be honest with you, it got really serious at one point. I won't tell you what all happened. It happened on Capitol Hill. But the point is, I wrote her a letter about 7 years ago, and I apologized to Maxine Waters. I said, Congresswoman, one, I apologize to you. I said, we may disagree, but I never, ever will ever again publicly denigrate you again. I said, number one, because you're my elder. Number two, because you do hold the office of position. I'll never do that again. But however, I hope that someday we will work together. Now, one thing about Maxine Waters, I will say she's one of my mentors in the sense of this. When I first met her in the spring of 1985, we was at a meeting, and she got up and said something very profound, which is I had already known, and was finally a politician said it, which is when I talk about this very day. She said, the definition of homelessness in America is homelessness is the ultimate statement of what is wrong with our society. Did you hear?
I heard that.
Homelessness is the ultimate statement of what's wrong with our rat race treadmill society. And I add now today, what has happened is that society is gaslighting the homeless for their own issues. Homeless people didn't just drop out the sky or grow up from the sidewalk. They came from mainstream society.
If you recognize homelessness, you're gonna have to recognize some other stuff. Now I want to segue over to Agnes Gibney, because she did run for Congress. She knows some people who are actually running for Congress now, one of which, Joe Collins III, actually ran against Maxine Waters. So I want to get Agnes's input on the political angle of homelessness. Agnes, your take on that?
Well, I'll tell you, the first thing that kind of disgusts me, I gotta honestly say, is how every candidate running for office would say, I want to end homelessness. And nobody does anything about it. Nobody really gets in there and goes to Skid Row or goes to San Bernardino and talk to the homeless to find out what is the issue, what is it that they need. What opportunities do they need? And but they use that as it's almost like a cliche, like a Miss Universe. What do you want to do? I want peace, world peace. It's just so cliche. But I'll tell you, Ted, I'm truly enjoying everything that you're saying, and I'm really learning a lot. And God willing, if I can help find a solution and be a voice to help, I'll be more than honored to work along you and help.
Well, the first thing, if I may say, that I'm in the process of dealing with people in downtown Los Angeles, the Simon Wiesenthal Center. Ken has been to these meetings, and other people. I'm the only activist in America that has a comprehensive, strategic, national policy and plan that humanely eradicates homelessness and its mainstream causes. But I want you to understand something fundamental. If you can in your mind, picture this is homelessness. Picture in your mind a big mansion, big beautiful mansion, and it's on fire, flames everywhere. And picture people running out of the mansion with fire in their clothes and coughing, and fighting the fire off their clothes. Picture, if you will, the fire department pulls up with their trucks, and picture the fire personnel jumping off the truck, running towards the people in the fire. Now, as the people are running, the fire truck are the social services that's supposed to be helping the homeless. The house that's burning is mainstream society. The people that are running out of the house are the homeless escaping the fire. The fire department jumps off the truck. They go and say to the homeless with their programs, no, 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 go back inside the house. Go back to the mainstream. That's insanity. Homeless people are not going to go back. They'd rather die in the streets with the rats or live in the streets with the rats than to die with the rat race in the mainstream. Until you get that consciousness about homelessness, that it's not about homeless people anymore, not because they're on drugs and alcohol and mentally ill. It's about the stresses of our society. It is not the homeless people who drive the psychotherapy industry for mental illnesses, the billions of dollars of psychotropic drugs. It's not the homeless that drives the alcohol industry. It's not the homeless that drives the street drug industry. That is people who live in houses, who have the cover to do it, and have the money to do it. And that's why I said earlier that they are gaslighting homelessness. See, the homeless are a mirror of our society.
Wow. So basically, in a way, and let me see if I can, add my little picture to this. I love doing that. That's one of the things that Southside Unicorn does. What you're saying is we go into this rat race engine, as you said earlier in your show. As you said earlier in your show, we are in this rat race. Some people opt out. Some people try to continue doing it every day, day in, day out. But as you go through the engine of America's economic nightmare, some of us end up as little water droplets and exhaust out the tailpipe, and nobody wants to give a damn about that. Did I give it a good analogy?
That's a very good analogy. Let me give you another picture. Here's a slave on a plantation. The slave aimlessly wanders off the plantation for some reason. He gets out there and he tastes freedom and liberty. So master catches up with the slave and say, Ken, boy, you get back to the plantation. And Ken said,
I don't want to go.
No, master, I ain't gonna go back to the plantation. He said, boy, I'll give you better food. I'll even give you some money for your services if you go back to the plantation.
Can I be famous too?
Master,
Will you make me
I'm not
famous?
going back. I'm not going back, master. He said, boy, if you don't go back, I'm gonna whoop you. Then start whipping. Boy, if you don't go back, I'm gonna lynch you. Then start lynching. What's the issue here? That human being, Ken, has tasted freedom. He'd rather die in the filth of the swamp than go back to losing his God-given and inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's why this country was founded by homeless people.
So, Ted, what I'm hearing and what I'm getting from what you're saying, and thank you for sharing this with us, you're trying to tell the American people there's an awful lot of patriots in those homeless camps.
You better believe it. They are acting out the founding fathers' dream. Remember, and my sister came here seeking the founding fathers' dream. She gave up the whatever of her country to risk everything to come.
Are we talking about Agnes?
Left their homes in England and Ireland and Sweden, whatever the country was over there, and they risked going across an ocean to this land called America. They became homeless. So that they
Agnes, real quick, let me ask you, Agnes, how long was your boat trip to Brazil?
I think it was 21 days.
You were on a boat for 21 days?
21 days.
Wow. So, ladies and gentlemen, this show is really awesome. To have these pearls of wisdom come from Ted Hayes, we're honored and we're blessed to be able to have this moment with him. But before we go into the other parts of the story or the rest of the show, I need to talk to my brother Keith Hardeen real quick. Keith, are you there?
I'm right here. I'm enjoying this. I'm listening.
No. The day of listening is now over, brother. I want you to do something with me, okay?
Sure.
I am a young black man or young black person. I don't know nothing about the Constitution. The only thing I heard about the Constitution, I heard in a barbershop. What I heard in that barbershop was, oh man, that damn document ain't about you. They call you 3/5 of a man. You ain't nobody to those people. Why you listening to the white man's Constitution and all of these things? This is what's inside my head. So, Ted, in about a minute, I need you to talk to me like I don't know nothing about the Constitution, the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th Amendment. Can you encapsulate what the hell is going on with this Constitution and black folk as it relates to us?
You talking to me
Well,
or Ken?
yeah, he's talking to me. There's quite a bit in the
I'm
Constitution.
talking to Keith. Yeah.
Yeah, there's quite a bit in the Constitution that gives us either implicitly or directly. Well, I won't say directly because it doesn't mention color or race per se. The 14th Amendment is good to understand, its background, that it was made for the blacks, for the chattel slave descendants. But then it doesn't use terms like slaves, chattel slaves. It doesn't use the term black, white. It doesn't use those terms. And
It does. Sorry, but it does. It does. But
well,
go
watch
ahead.
this, Ted. I'm going to get to you, Ted, in just a minute. I was hoping that my brother. I was hoping. Put it this way: we're about to have your foot go into this shoe, Ted. So I'm hoping that Keith will be the shoehorn to get this conversation started. Continue, Ted. Continue, Keith.
Well, let me read directly from the article. This is Article 1. No person, and this is Section 2. No person. Okay, well, let me skip some of that for sake of time. Representatives and
let's keep it short. Yeah.
Representative and taxes shall be apportioned to the several states which may be included among the union, and then according to their respective numbers. So the subject matter is numbers. He's talking about numbers of persons, which shall be determined by adding to the whole number of free persons, including those bound to service for a term of years, and excluding Indians not taxed, 3/5 of all other persons. Now, 3/5 of all other persons. So he's talking about persons who are free and persons who are not free, because other persons are persons who are not free. But they didn't say slaves. They didn't say blacks. They didn't say chattel slaves. I find that very interesting that they didn't use those terms, but they used.
So they were being politically correct even back in those days, because if you're pointing out the fact that the color of the citizen was never really an issue, it was the issue of freedom itself. I get what you're saying. So now I can feel Ted over there ready to rock and roll. And the only way I can think of to ask this question is this way to Ted. We got Juneteenth, which is what we all predominantly celebrate as the Emancipation Proclamation, which was, 1866 to 68. Here we are on the eve of Black History Month. Ted, I want to ask you, what role does the Emancipation Proclamation and the 1866 to 68 Civil Rights 14th Amendment Act play in this matter of homelessness?
The reason that we have the disproportionate of Black citizens who are homeless is because we do not understand the power of the Emancipation Proclamation and the Civil Rights Act of 1866, which is the 14th Amendment. If we understood that, we would not be in this condition that we are in. But this is why I teach it so much, because until we Black citizens, and all citizens for that matter, understand what that law actually is and entails and the power that it wields, we are going to be destroyed and taken over by the socialist Marxist element, because they're using this ignorance that Black people have to our power to subjugate white people under their thumb. And it really actually doesn't have anything to do with our skin color. It has to do with our experiences. But because white America,
right there, Ted. I want to ask you a question. The 14th Amendment, recognizing that Agnes Gibney came from Budapest, Hungary. She
Right.
fled the Soviet invasion. She
Right.
spent an arduous 21-day boat trip to
Right.
Brazil for her freedom. And she
Right.
ultimately found herself stateless, homeless,
Right.
and came to America, took the test and all of that. So, Ted, my question is this. Recognizing Agnes Gibney's sojourn, would the 14th Amendment apply to her?
Only a certain aspect of it will apply to her. Let's say she became a citizen under Article 1, Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution. There was no amendment. She did not need an amendment. We had to have an amendment to be into the Constitution. So she became a citizen through the Article 1, Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution through customs, immigration, and naturalization. Now that she is a citizen, when she had her child, because that child was born to her who was a citizen in the United States, that child is a United States citizen and has certain rights as well. But other rights that child does not have, which is detailed in the Civil Rights Act of 1866, because there in the Civil Rights Act of 1866, which was codified into the Constitution of the United States, actually uses the word involuntary servitude. It actually uses the word colored. It actually identifies white citizens. It actually says that the involuntary citizens involuntary servitude, that we are to experience a declaration of independence, freedom as citizenship, as is enjoyed by white citizens. That's Section 1 of the law. So there is a difference, but other than that, she is a citizen through Article 1, Section 8, and her son is a citizen because he was born here under her. But if she was illegally here and she had her son, no, her son does not apply in the 14th Amendment, Section 1.
And that was my question to you, and I guess I need Keith to give me an amen on that. Keith, am I to understand that the 14th Amendment does not apply to illegal aliens?
No, it does not. It does not apply to them. Why? Because if you look at the first part, once again, I'm going to go with the text. No state. Well, it talks about all persons born or naturalized in the United States. It says, and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. I think that's jurisdiction is the key word. They are part of another jurisdiction, the jurisdiction of the country that they have run away from, and they haven't done it legally. They did it illegally. So in other words,
understood.
Yes, simple as that.
Okay, and Agnes, this question is for you, Agnes. I'm about to come to you, Agnes. I'm about to come to you right now. Okay. Agnes, when with regards to the 14th Amendment, as you are a naturalized American citizen, do you feel that you actually benefited or had anything affect your life relevant to the 14th Amendment?
No, but I wanted to explain something to you. When my son Ronald was born here, he was born in Long Beach. When he was born here, I was not a U.S. citizen at the time that my son was born. I was here legally in the country. Therefore, according to the amendments, my son could never be a president of the United States, as I was told, because I was not a U.S. citizen. Now my two daughters were born after I became a U.S. citizen. Therefore, if they wanted to become a president, they could, because I was fully vetted in United States. I was a citizen. But no, the only benefit that I had, that I felt that I belonged somewhere, being a stateless, since my country took our citizenship away, I felt a sense of belonging and the right to vote, which should only be granted to people born legally in the United States who are fully vetted, not even children of illegal alien. I'm not so sure about that one. I would have to revisit
that. I guess that's a story for another show.
Yeah,
this is really some very in-depth stuff. And again, we wouldn't be able to go into these, and pardon my metaphor, we wouldn't be able to go into these weeds without the help of Ted Hayes, who has been there, done that. This is a very serious issue, and I'm glad we're shedding light on it. This looks like a part of a very intricate plan to disenfranchise, to defund African Americans from their citizenship. It was very important, Agnes, that you mentioned the term citizenship. You have yours, and I'm glad for that. African Americans who were born here, chattel slaves, or the descendants of chattel slaves, our citizenship was as locked in as your two daughters that you mentioned earlier. However, we find ourselves, as Ted Hayes has pointed out, with the homelessness issue in America, we're being disenfranchised from our rights, from our ability to pursue life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, unless we give up the trappings of this industrial complex. Ted,
Now,
this is
Kenny,
a serious undertaking.
can I ask you a question? And for Mr. Hayes, the same thing, and Keith.
Mm-hmm.
We have had so many Black congressmen, congresswomen. Why haven't any of them stood up for the Black community?
Mm-hmm.
Again, folks, I've dealt with the Black community. Jesse Jackson knows me, Al Sharpton, Congressional Black Caucus, Maxine, Karen Bass. A lot of people know who I am. I've ran these things by them over the years. Believe me, these 37 years, I've ran these things by them. I think, one, that they just don't know. You know, the Congressional Black Caucus calls itself the conscience of the Congress. Behind closed doors, all the other representatives whisper about the Congressional Black Caucus. They call them the special ed class because they do nothing but have a good time and party. I think, though, if the Congressional Black Caucus members and African American leaders, whoever they are, knew what I know, I believe that they would do what I'm trying to do. And that's why I'm trying to be patient and raising my attitude to one of understanding their fears, their frustrations. I don't think they're evil. I think they're misguided and they're frightened. My job is to create an atmosphere where they can feel safe to come out of the darkness. You got to remember something, my sister, and everybody listening. You cannot compare the development of the American Africans with the development of other people who have come here willingly. You got to remember that we spent 245 years, that's almost 4.5 generations, being living human property of another person. When we got out of slavery, 99% of us in 1865 did not know how to read because it was against the law for us to read. We were caught reading, we were murdered. And then when the Civil Rights Act of 1866 passed with such power that the president who took over for Abraham Lincoln, when he read the bill, he vetoed it. And the reason why he vetoed it, which he got impeached for later, but he vetoed it because he said this law gives too much power to the Black citizens over the white citizens. And so consequently, even though the law was passed, down south where the slaves were primarily, when white people like Republicans would come down south, mainly young men, to teach Black people how to read so that they can look into the Constitution, see the Civil Rights Act of 1866, the 14th Amendment, and actualize their power, they would be strung up and lynched. They were lynching white people before they were lynching Black folks.
We understand that. What I would like to do now is go back into where I was trying to get the question into Ted Hayes, because we're about to run out of time here. Thank you, Agnes, for that question. That's a very poignant question, which means this should almost be a two-part show. Again, it's Ted Hayes' show, Your Power Weapon. It'll be his decision.
Can we do it again, Ken? Can we do it again, Ken?
Can we do it again? That'll be up to you, good sir. So my question to you, Mr. Hayes, Ted Hayes, is what is your comprehensive strategic national policy and plan?
When it comes to Black citizens, the first thing I'm launching little by little, I need help, y'all, need help. I need to launch a nationwide campaign of awareness on this particular power, your power weapon. You see, folks, as much as we fight for right in this country, if we don't know our constitutional principles, we're losing, obviously. And this particular one especially has been hidden from us. I believe that the day that we can get this out to black citizens across the country, to enough of us, and we all have now about an average 4th grade reading level, we get this into their hands, that's when the power will begin to surge, and we begin to use this kind of language. That's when the doors of justice will fling open to us. That's why the Democrats have always kept us ignorant. There were laws against us under Jim Crow. We were not allowed to read. It was against us to get an equal education. Why? Because they knew. And here is the secret to why the socialists hate Donald Trump. It's not because he was against the socialists. He was for the liberation, the full liberation of the descendants of the chattel slaves. That's why he said, I build the wall to end illegal immigration. Why? Because it hurts black people more than anybody else. He said that the 14th Amendment does not belong to anchor children. It belongs to black people because they were slaves. He said,
And that is why
Abraham Lincoln, and that scared the living daylights out of them. That's why they hate Trump to this day. Because we black folks own the salvation of this nation.
And that is why I brought that up earlier in the show and introduced it in that way. Thank you, Keith Hardeen, for pointing out the 14th Amendment in its purest form. Thank you, Agnes, for mentioning how your children have their citizenship. These things are very important. This is why they didn't like President Trump, because if you can decipher the 14th, 15th, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, it will scare a true leftist, a socialist, a Marxist. It will scare.
It'll finish him. It'll finish him.
There's an untapped resource. And so what I wanted to say, ladies and gentlemen, is, Ted, where do we learn more about your program?
Every Monday night, 7 o'clock p.m. Pacific Coast time, 10 o'clock p.m. East Coast time, your power weapon on urbansmartnetwork.com. You can also go, if you want to know about that 14th Amendment and get into the details of that, you go to the digital 1, digital 4, th, the 14th.com. And if you want to know more about the homeless, just go to I'm sorry, what was that? Dome? Yeah, .com. I'm sorry, the 14th.us. And on the homeless resolution, you go to domevillage.us. Domevillage.us. Or just call me 424-248-4219.
And I got
outstanding. And again, go ahead.
Yeah, let me just. I want to answer Agnes' question too. She asked Ted, and then she asked me, and so I just want to give my little part. And I think, Agnes, I want to say, and this is where I respectfully, with all respect, and my brother Ted knows me, we have some differences on certain things. So I'm going to say this is where I differ with him, as far as the knowledge that is in people like Maxine Waters. I know that's Ted's friend, so I'm not going to go blast her. But I've also
you can you don't have that commitment. I got that commitment.
I've been in her presence. I've spoken to her. She's been to my church. She's spoken in front of my church, and so I know exactly what I'm talking about when I say she knows exactly what she's doing. Just like all the left and all the NAACP, they are turncoats against not only blacks, but mainly against the Constitution, and constituted authorities, against God. That's what they are speaking against, because they ignore the truth. It's not that they don't know the truth.
Yes, they do. They know the truth. I look at it this way. If you go downtown Los Angeles and try to go do a business meeting, it's absolutely impossible not to see the homeless situation.
Yeah, let me finish. They know the truth because they have been around too long. And they have seen it all. In fact, this is all by design, Agnes. This is all by design, what they have done to the black community. Yeah. So I just wanted to say that. And God has already put the knowledge in them, but they refuse to acknowledge the truth. Therefore, God gives them over to
them. Hold up, man. Y'all got to remember something about us black folks. You got to remember something, man. You know, we're not like everybody else. I'm sure when Maxine Waters was a young woman, Karen Bass, look at my friend Bobby Rush. She was a leader in the Black Panther Party. All these people were young, like me, and fired up and wanted to do right, but because they did not have an answer to the complex problems of Black people in America, more than anybody else's problems in America, they got drunk on the power, and they wanted to continue taking that power. And so they don't know.
Well,
It's our job.
I don't
It's
want
my
us to
job.
segue into a verbal melee, right?
It's my
Here's what I'm
job to
asking
help
everybody
them
to do.
understand.
Let's encapsulate in this regard. Ted Hayes has interjected himself into the homeless situation of America. There are those people that God sends forth that are like clarions. They come to bring a message. You have Winston Churchill. If it weren't for Winston Churchill, the aggression of the Nazis would have smothered Great Britain. Today, as we end this show, we're grappling with the issues and putting prayers out for Ukraine, because the Soviet Union under Vladimir Putin is poised to go back into the Ukraine. We have Agnes Gibney, a congressional candidate, and one of President Trump's angel moms present with us, who fled from Budapest when the Soviet Union invaded Budapest. We have Ted Hayes, who is telling us there's something going on with the homeless issue that's hiding a much greater issue. Ladies and gentlemen, you're going to want to stay tuned to Your Power Weapon, the show of Ted Hayes, hosted on Urban Smart Network. We'll be back on again on Monday at the same time. You're going to want to tune in. There's a lot of things we need to get out to the people, and we need to do it pretty quick. Ted, this is your show. The last few minutes are yours, sir.
The only reason China, Russia, all these countries are rising up is because they told the United States last year when the China summit, when the Secretary of State began to chide China for suppression and genocide of the Uyghurs and the robbing of people's freedoms and so forth, the Chinese government said, you, United States, cannot tell us how to treat our citizens until you treat your Black citizens and your homeless and your veterans well. I've been saying that for 37 years. I said, one day it's going to come upon you, America, when they're going to pull your whole card. They're going to say, you can't talk to us until you rectify your chattel slave issue. Because if it wasn't for chattel slavery, America, you would not be the United States of America. We know you cheated. And until you fix that, you got nothing to say. Now, here comes the master of the Democratic Party, who was the primary oppressor of American Africans in this country. Now the president, the very same guy who said, you don't vote for me, you ain't Black. The very same guy, this very same guy since then has done absolutely nothing for these folks. The Soviets, the socialists, the Chinese communists, they all see the hypocrisy. And because, America, we did not resolve this wound of chattel slavery that our nation was born with, like an open sore, it draws vector, flies, and disease. You can swat at the flies all day and scream at the socialists and the communists all day long until America heals this chattel slavery wound, which is what Abraham Lincoln set out to do until the Democrats assassinated him. Until we heal that wound, folks, God in heaven will allow the worst of the worst to take over this country, because 740,000 innocent young white boys murdered each other, killed each other during the Civil War over, because of, and for us. And I have a responsibility to see to it that their deaths and the deaths of everybody else who suffered in this country for our freedom is not in vain. Ken, I want to thank you for hosting tonight. I think we will pick this up again next week. Keith Hardeen, I think you're going to bring to us next week some people on your school choice. I got a bone to pick with y'all next week on this. But Ken, if you can host again next week, we'll start off on the homeless and we'll bring up this school choice, because I got a combat boot for that one. And and I'm gonna show you how school choice, my argument there, connects with the homeless situation in this country. Okay?
Outstanding. Well, let me say this to everyone. It was my honor to host your show, Ted, Your Power Weapon, on Urban Smart Network. This has been one of the hallmarks of my life. And again, I couldn't say thank you enough. ladies and gentlemen, you're going to want to tune in next week when we begin or resume this very important conversation. And I will, full disclosure, I believe in California school choice too. So Ted, when you break out that boot, I guess I'm gonna get a little bit of it too.
Hey,
but
put the juke, baby.
You know what I'm saying? So again, this is Ken White. This is Ken White filling in for Ted Hayes on Your Power Weapon on Urban Smart Network. Thank you all for joining us. This has been an awesome evening, and we are out.
See y'all.
Wow, he's good.
Good night, everybody.